When you picture Spain, you probably think of olive skin, dark hair, and a culture shaped by Romans and Moors. But scientists recently discovered something that completely changes this story. When they analyzed ancient bones from across Spain, they found evidence of one of the most dramatic genetic events in European history. Nearly every male bloodline that existed in Spain was wiped out and replaced. What could cause something like that? To understand what happened, we need to go back thousands of years before Spain even existed. Here's something that might surprise you. Around 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, the people living in Spain looked nothing like modern Spaniards. Scientists found ancient remains in northern Spain that revealed something unexpected. This person had dark skin and blue eyes, a combination that seems strange today but was actually common back then. These were the original inhabitants, Western European hunter-gatherers. Their DNA was completely different from what we see in Spain now. The men carried a genetic marker called I2, while the women showed incredibly diverse maternal lineages, especially something called haplogroup U. These people formed the foundation of Spain's population. Their genetic signature is still there in modern Spaniards, just heavily diluted. But they were about to encounter the first major wave of newcomers, and this encounter would change everything. Around 5,500 BCE, strangers arrived in Spain carrying something revolutionary: agriculture. These migrants came originally from Anatolia, bringing wheat, livestock, and permanent settlements. But here's the crucial detail that scientists noticed. When these farming communities mixed with the local hunter-gatherers, something interesting happened. The genetic change was gradual and peaceful. The men brought new paternal lineages, mainly something called G2A, completely different from the local I2. The women introduced maternal markers that would eventually spread across all of Europe. DNA shows that these two groups didn't wipe each other out. Instead, they lived side by side for hundreds, even thousands of years. They traded, they married, they blended together slowly over time. This peaceful mixing is incredibly important to remember, because it proves something critical. Spain had already experienced a major population change without erasing the original male lineages. That's why what comes next is so shocking. Around 2500 BCE, everything changed in a way that scientists are still trying to fully understand. A massive wave of people from the steppes, the grasslands near the Black Sea, swept across Europe. In Spain, this period is linked to something called the Bell Beaker culture. When scientists examined bones from before and after this period, they discovered something that rarely happens in human history. Before this wave, Spanish men carried those old lineages, I2 from the hunter-gatherers and G2A from the farmers. After this wave, those lineages had almost completely vanished. They were replaced by a new marker called R01B. This happened incredibly fast, within just a few centuries. But here's where it gets even stranger. The women's DNA stayed continuous and uninterrupted. The overall genetic mixture showed blending, not total replacement. So the local population wasn't completely wiped out. But nearly all the local men disappeared from the genetic record. How is that even possible? Scientists call this pattern sex-biased admixture, and it reveals something dark about how populations can change. When an incoming group consists mainly of men who hold military or social power, they leave far more descendants through the paternal line. Meanwhile, local men decline sharply through violence, displacement, or being completely excluded from having children. This explains why R01B is now the dominant male lineage in Spain and Western Europe, reaching especially high levels in places like the Basque region. But Spain didn't become uniform after this upheaval. By the first millennium BCE, the peninsula was splitting into two different worlds. The west and north, places like Galicia, remained tied to Atlantic populations. The east and south, regions like Catalonia and Andalusia, were shaped by Mediterranean trade networks. You won't believe what this means for understanding modern Spain. Modern genetic testing reveals something unexpected about Spanish identity. Spain isn't a single genetic block at all. The most important genetic boundaries don't follow mountains or rivers. Instead, they follow centuries-old patterns of settlement and marriage networks. Atlantic Spaniards genetically cluster with other Atlantic populations. Mediterranean Spaniards show different genetic profiles, even though they all share the same underlying mixture of hunter-gatherer, farmer, and steppe ancestry. But there's one group that stands out as truly unusual: the Basque. They're famous for speaking Euskara, a language completely unrelated to any other European language. For years, people assumed they were some kind of ancient remnant that escaped major migrations. DNA was about to prove that assumption completely wrong, and the truth is far more interesting. Here's the paradox that confused scientists for years. The Basques show high continuity with ancient Iberian populations in their overall DNA. Their maternal lineages show strong local continuity. They seem ancient and isolated. But their paternal lineages tell a completely different story. Basque men carry R1b at exceptionally high frequencies, the same marker that replaced the original male lineages during the Bronze Age catastrophe. So, if the Basques are supposedly ancient, why do they carry the invaders' paternal DNA? The answer reveals something fascinating about how populations preserve themselves. The Basque didn't escape the Bronze Age replacement at all. They were caught in the same wave as everyone else. But afterwards, something crucial happened. Basque society practiced extremely strict endogamy, meaning they only married within their own community. This effectively froze their genetic structure, preserving both the local background and the R1b paternal lineages that had already become dominant. But the genetic story of Spain wasn't over yet. When we enter the era of written history, Rome, the Visigoths, and Islamic rule, something surprising emerges from the DNA evidence. These empires completely transformed Spanish language and religion. Yet their genetic impact was far smaller than anyone expected. Studies suggest that Rome's direct genetic influence was modest compared to its massive cultural footprint. This makes sense when you think about it. Rome operated as a system of governance, armies and cities, not necessarily as mass population replacement. The Visigoths followed the same pattern, forming a small ruling elite over a much larger local population, but one historical event did leave a major genetic mark, and it happened much later. The Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Spain from Islamic rule, created a unique genetic pattern. Each northern kingdom expanded along its own path, carrying its own settlers into newly conquered lands. Scientists describe the result as vertical genetic stripes across Spain. Yet there's one more hidden layer that nobody talks about. The year 1492 is famous for Columbus sailing to America. But something else happened that year in Spain. All Jews were ordered to either convert to Christianity or leave. Many departed, but a substantial number converted, becoming known as conversos. For centuries, this Jewish ancestry was hidden in written records, erased from official history. But DNA doesn't forget. Modern studies use specific genetic markers to estimate Sephardic Jewish ancestry in certain parts of Spain, and the results show it's far from negligible. Now scientists are careful to note that these markers aren't absolute proof, since Mediterranean populations can share overlapping lineages. But the broader picture remains clear. A significant layer of Jewish ancestry was buried in Spanish history, invisible in the chronicles but quietly preserved in the genes. When you look at all these layers together, something becomes unmistakably clear. Spain, viewed through DNA, is not a single people formed from one source. It's the result of multiple population layers accumulating over thousands of years, shaped by both peaceful mixing and episodes of violent replacement. The original dark-skinned, blue-eyed hunter-gatherers left their mark. The Neolithic farmers added their layer through gradual integration. Then came the Bronze Age catastrophe that replaced nearly all male lineages in just a few centuries. Atlantic and Mediterranean influences carved the peninsula into genetic regions. The Basque froze their genetic structure through strict marriage practices. Roman, Visigothic, and Islamic empires left surprisingly small genetic footprints despite their massive cultural impact. The Reconquista painted vertical genetic stripes from north to south, and Jewish conversos added a hidden layer that official history tried to erase. Spanish DNA tells a story not of homogeneity, but of movement, migration, conflict, marriage, and survival, quietly preserved in millions of people living today.